to 2021 and character class. Today we're going to talk about the U.S. citizen, United States citizenship portion of our class. It is a very big portion. It covers both 8th and 10th grade portions. In 10th grade, you're going to get a lot more detail on trials and serving on a jury, a lot more detail. But for both classes, because this is a curriculum that was brought about just only recently in the last season from last year, obviously 10th graders, you missed some of this. And of course, you're in the citizenship portion. 8th graders, you're getting this because in history class, you learn early about U.S. citizenship should do's and must do's. We taught you briefly what they were. We named them. But we more or less focused on the Constitution at the time. Now in character class, citizenship becomes a very big meaning. And one only has to go out in the world today or just look at the news media to see that some of these things are contentious. So if you're looking for a safe space, you're not going to get it in this class. You're going to get some really important things that you must learn, but from a dispassionate perspective. I am not here to make you an activist. I am not here to tell you what to believe in. But I am going to tell you what the American version of citizenship is. And that is one thing that we're going to stick with. So what are the first things? The should do's. There's 4 should do's, and there's 4 must do's. Let's talk about the should do's first, and I'll use this board here to define them. So the first thing we talk about is U.S. citizen should do's. We're not saying you have to do it, but we're certainly saying you should do it. And the first one that we talk about is help create a just society. Help create a just society. We're going to get a lot more detail of what this means, particularly all those words, just, society, create. Why do we say create? There are specific things in this curriculum that you need to understand. All those words have a specific meaning. But right now, as an overview, the question that the people always come up is this: what are American moral virtues? What are American moral virtues? Because ultimately, these things relate to the term just. And again, we will not use the world according to Mr. DeRay. We will not use the world according to someone who is just making up curriculum because they have a political slant. We're going to use strictly the Founding Fathers version of this. And of course, as you guys remember, we're going straight for the first edition of the American version of the English language, Webster's first edition by Noah Webster. That's our starting point. And that's where we're going to go. Again, it's not my world, it's not somebody else's opinion, it's what the Founding Fathers saw. That's where we're starting. That way you can make your decisions with that basis. Next one is serve the community. Maybe over the holidays, you go ahead and maybe you're at a church or maybe you work with a group that volunteers. That's serving the community. You help out, you volunteer, you give of yourself. You donate money, for example, or you go to the food pantry and donate food. We do these things all the time. That's serving the community. The question I always has is, what are we doing? Where do we find that? Well, serving the community, volunteer organizations, you volunteer. You're in your church or maybe another active group, okay? Even in your guilds. I know this year it has been missing, but guilds, the intent of this year was to actually have the guilds actually do a little bit of this work to help out in the community. And we talk about the community here. How do we support it? Those sorts of things. Do you need to be in an organization to serve your community? Obviously not. People donate all the time to help somebody else out, right? Recently we had somebody in our community, our education, our school community, come down with a cancer. And so knowing that those medical bills needed to be lessened and resolved, because they currently have a plan that the government planned, it's difficult. We see this all the time. So we throw money in the kitty. We throw money in the pot, put some money. That's serving the community. It's not really all that hard to do. Sometimes these jobs can be really hard though, okay? Volunteer organizations, sometimes it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time. So what's the difference between that though? Well, here you're working one-on-one with folks mostly, helping create a just society. These are the words we're going to get into. You probably understand that you see something wrong and you decide to report it. Whereas here, you might see something in your community that you're going to improve upon. Okay? So these people always get kind of confused in these two, and that's why I bring them up. But you're going to see this more once we get into this and what that really means. Groups, society, just, create. Okay. The next one that you should do is stay informed on issues. So stay informed on issues. Some of you guys always ask me, hey, Mr. DeRay, why do you write? We are a Western heritage school. One of the reasons that I write is so that you get used to cursive writing. That is a big deal. So someone sees, well, sometimes I can't read that writing. Well, this is one of the things that we do. We teach you to start reading this, okay? And of course, using this video is much helpful. Now, staying informed on issues. The number one question everyone asks is know the difference between a fact and a quote fact. Why do we say that? This is very recent, and this is something that we talked about a lot, is there's a lot of information out there. One side, political side especially, will say that's false. Another one will say that's fake. And you're going to have to look at sources that are less opinionated to find facts. For example, it's one thing for me to say, everybody should be shut down in all the schools because people are going to catch COVID. You hear that all the time. On the other hand, a true fact would be, let me find the comorbidity rates of the virus. Who is getting sick and who is getting ill, and then who is also perishing from this? And what are the age groups? What are the factors? Smoking, heart disease, these things. And then what source is that? You could get that same information from, example, communist China. We know their numbers were very low. We know that now. It's been well published and well documented that their numbers were way too low. But on the other hand, they did publish percentages of comorbidities, and smoking was the biggest factor to perishing from this virus. So that's it. That's important. You got to get in the weeds. You probably say, "Well, I just want someone to tell me what to do." You're a U.S. citizen. You gotta look at information. You gotta separate the passion and find the correct information. And you gotta watch out. This is very difficult because you have what we call community Barbie and community Ken. Some of you, because we didn't celebrate Veterans Day, some of you guys said, "Hey, Mr. Day, can you show me?" And I did. I showed you. Remember that one slide? For some of you, it said, "Beware of community Ken and community Barbie." These are the people that want to tell you what to do and how to do things. And you see this all across countries. Religious ruling councils, fact checkers online. And if you follow who they are and what they've done, you know they have a political slant. So you have to be very wary. You guys are much more attuned to this than perhaps people who don't pay attention to this kind of information. So staying informed on issues is difficult. It's a should do. We're not going to require you to do it, but that's a hard thing, particularly if you're a parent and you have a huge everyday life and you turn on the radio and all of a sudden someone says something and it turns out not to be true. Which gets into the last one. You don't have to, but you should vote in local state and federal elections. This is very contentious right now. I'll write this over here. Simply because, why? Well, the recent election we had, there's a lot of claims to fraud. There's a lot of claims to irregularities. There's a lot of claims to voting standards weren't being followed. Okay, well, what does all that mean? And you see some people suppressing that kind of information, and you see some people can maybe going overboard with that information. This is really tough, though. And so now that a lot of people are saying, well, since this potentially was fraudulent, why should I vote? We're going to get into it, but here's the questions. Here's the bigger questions. Are you going to preserve future citizens' rights? Now, make that apostrophe. Are you going to preserve the future citizens' rights when you vote? Consider the rights that you have right now. Put it this way. If I vote for something and I like something one way or the other, that's okay. But the big question really is, what's the impact on you? Am I doing the right thing for you? Is the tax or constitutional changes or referendums or elected officials, are they going to preserve the founding rights for you? That's the question that has to be asked. If I'm going to vote for something for short-term gain, or I'm going to give up popular sovereignty, there it is, Constitution. If I give that up, I'm denying your rights. To me, and to a lot of other folks, that's the number one thing. Are you preserving future citizens' rights? Am I voting for something that's going to benefit me, or I'm voting for something that's going to preserve your rights? The next one is, this is the big question, because we always talk about how, and you guys are going to study this in World War II, sophomores, you've already studied this, 8th graders, you will study this later. We always talk about World War II. How did Hitler come to power? He was voted in. How did Hugo Chavez, the dictator of Venezuela, completely destroyed his economy? How did he rise to power? He was voted in. These folks were voted in. So that the question, so you have to be careful. Are you voting for democracy? Are you going to get a short-term gain? And by doing so, you end up voting for a dictator. And this is easy to say today, but when the economy is in bad shape, people are starving, it becomes a question of bread versus rights. Which one will you choose when you see your family starving? This is not easy. In fact, this is quite tough. So I caution you before you go, oh, I got that. Well, we have to think deeper. We have to think deeper. And the biggest destruction of human capability is communist and socialist societies. Nazi Germany was National Socialism. Doesn't matter what you want to call that. A dictatorship is a dictatorship, and people die. We have to be careful of that. All right. Now, next one. Now, those are the should do's. Help create a just society. Serve the community. Stay informed on issues and vote in local, state, and federal elections. This concludes this portion of class. We'll now move on to citizenship must-dos. See you on the high ground.